Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring something really fascinating. The idea that intelligence might not be limited to humans.
Oh, yeah. It's a really big question.
It really is. It might be way more widespread in nature than we tend to think.
Mm.
And our main source for this deep dive is Jeremy Narby's book, Intelligence in Nature.
That's a good one.
Yeah. You may have even submitted this one for a deep dive.
It's possible.
Yeah, because you've started to wonder, like me, if intelligence is really just a human thing.
Right. Like, that's the only place it exists.
Yeah.
Is that the traditional view?
Exactly.
Okay.
So let's dive in and see what we can find out.
Let's do it.
All right. So Narby's book really challenges the Western worldview on this. You know, the one that often sees animals as just these simple machines. And he contrasts it with indigenous knowledge systems. These systems see intention and intelligence in all living things.
Yeah. It's that clash that's so interesting.
Absolutely. It's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example from the book that highlights this clash?
Yeah, definitely. So Narby talks about this Amazonian shaman named Juan Flores Salazar, and he worked with a group of molecular biologists who were studying ayahuasca.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And two of these scientists actually said they were talking to plant mothers. Yeah, during their ayahuasca experiences.
Huh.
These encounters really shook their scientific perspectives. They even started to think about, you know, the possibility of consciousness and intelligence in the plant world.
Okay, that's not something you'd normally read in a scientific journal.
No, not really.
So does Narby give any explanations for these really different perspectives?
He does. He points out that Western science usually wants like hard material evidence.
Right.
But indigenous knowledge systems acknowledge a deeper level of being, like a soul or a spirit in all things.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there's a Japanese term for it, chisei.
Kisei.
Yeah. And it means that everything's alive and has this life force that we might not be able to see or understand right away.
It makes you think maybe asking what is intelligence is not the right question.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be asking, like, how are we defining intelligence?
That's a good point.
Yeah. Think about the term bird brain. It's meant to be like an insult.
Yeah.
Like you're not smart.
Right.
But have you ever really thought about all the complex stuff birds do every day?
Yeah. It's pretty amazing, like solving problems all the time.
It is.
Yeah. And bird brain is so inaccurate, it's not true at all.
It really isn't.
Like, take crows. They remember where they hid thousands of seeds.
Really?
Yeah. It's amazing spatial memory that most of us couldn't even do.
So their brains are much more sophisticated than we give them credit for.
Definitely.
So they're not just pecking around randomly.
No, they're not. There's a purpose there.
What does that seed caching behavior tell us then?
Well, it shows they have this advanced spatial reasoning, and they have great memory too. They're making decisions, they have strategies, and they adapt to their environment. That
Right.
takes some serious cognitive processing.
It really does. It's incredible to think that we're surrounded by these creatures showing intelligence, and we barely even notice it.
Yeah, we see them all the time.
Yeah. Are there other examples that might surprise us?
Oh yeah, tons. Like Martin Jurfa's research on honeybees is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, he found out that bees use abstract concepts like sameness to navigate mazes.
Wait, so bees understand abstract concepts?
It seems so.
That's wild. How did he even figure that out?
Okay, so picture a Y-shaped maze.
Okay.
The entrance has a symbol, and only one path inside matches the symbol and has like a sugary reward at the end.
Okay.
The bees learn to connect the idea of sameness to getting the reward.
Okay, I get that. But how do you teach a bee the concept of sameness?
Well, that's the crazy part. Jurfa and his team changed the symbols. They used shapes and colors, even smells. And the bees still got it. They transferred that knowledge of sameness.
Wow. So these tiny creatures are thinking abstractly. What did other scientists think about that?
Oh, it was huge.
Yeah.
It really challenged the idea that insects were just tiny robots following instincts.
Right.
Many scientists pushed back hard. They didn't want to believe that insects could be that smart.
It seems like the more we look for intelligence in nature, the more we find.
It's true.
And maybe our definition of intelligence needs to change. Maybe it needs to include different ways of thinking, not just our human way.
Yeah. That's one of the big ideas in Narby's book. He's saying that intelligence isn't just one thing. It's all these different ways that living things interact with and adapt to their environments.
This is making me completely rethink how I see everything around me.
Yeah, it's a big shift.
But where did these complex brains and nervous systems come from? How did they evolve?
Well, it was a really gradual process, driven by survival, the need to survive. Think about predators and prey. Both have to react super fast to stay alive. It's like this arms race. And that's what led to the development of these nervous systems that can process information and make you react quickly.
So running for your life or chasing something down requires a lot of brain power.
You got it.
Okay. But what about creatures without brains, like plants? They don't run from anything.
That's where things get even more interesting. Even plants which seem so passive are actually incredible at sensing and responding to the world around them. Take the Venus flytrap, for example.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
It's a plant, but it can snap shut in like a millisecond to catch an insect.
I know. It's amazing. But how does a plant know when to do that?
Right. It's not like it has eyes or a brain to process information.
Exactly.
Well, it's all about electrical signals, similar to the ones in our nerves. These signals tell the trap to close super fast.
Wow.
So even without a brain, plants can react really quickly to things happening around them.
It really makes you wonder what other intelligent things they're doing that we just don't see.
All the time.
That's something we should definitely dive into when we come back, because we are just getting started. Welcome back to our deep dive into intelligence in nature. We were talking about the Venus flytrap and how it reacts so fast. It makes you wonder what other intelligent things plants are doing that we just don't see.
Right. Like, what else are we missing?
Exactly.
Well, this is where the work of Anthony Chiravis comes in. He's a plant biologist.
Okay.
And he's been arguing that plants actually have intentions and make decisions.
Wait, really? Intentions and decisions? Those sound like human things.
I know. It's a pretty bold claim.
It is. So how does he back that up?
His research is all about plant plasticity. That's the ability of plants to change how they grow based on their environment.
Okay, so they're not just stuck growing wherever they happen to be.
Right. It's way more dynamic than that. They actually gather information about what's around them, like how much light there is, what nutrients are available, even if there are other plants competing with them. And then they use that information to make choices that help them grow and survive.
So they're like constantly analyzing their situation.
Yeah, it's like they're making calculated decisions.
Wow. Can you give me an example of this plant computation in action?
Sure. One of the coolest examples comes from Chiravis's own research. His team put a special protein into tobacco plants that made them glow when calcium levels went up inside their cells.
Okay. So what happened?
They found out that these modified plants reacted instantly to touch, like they would glow brighter with each touch.
So they were responding in real time.
Exactly. And the crazy thing is it was happening in milliseconds, as fast as our own neurons communicate.
So that means plants are processing information way faster than we thought.
It seems so.
It's like we've totally underestimated them.
Yeah.
But plants are still complex organisms with lots of cells. What about simpler life forms? Could they be intelligent too?
You're thinking about slime molds, aren't you?
You know it. They've always seemed so strange to me. Like something out of a movie.
They're definitely unique.
Yeah. What makes them so special?
Well, for one thing, they can exist as just single-celled amoebas. You can't even see them without a microscope.
Wow.
But then they can also merge together and form this giant single cell that we can see. It's called a plasmodium.
Wait, so one giant cell? That's wild. And these things are intelligent.
Well, they definitely make us question what we think intelligence is. There was this Japanese biologist, Toshiyuki Nakadaki.
Okay.
And he did this amazing experiment with a slime mold called Physarum polycephalum. He put pieces of it in a maze.
Did they figure it out?
Not only did they find their way out, but they found the shortest path between food sources, like they solved the maze.
No way. A single-celled organism solved a maze.
I know. It's incredible. You'd think you need a brain for that.
You would? How is that even possible?
That's what Nakagaki wanted to know. He was so blown away by it that he even called the slime mold clever and cunning, even though it doesn't have a nervous system.
So if it's not a brain, what's making it do that?
Well, Nakagaki's research suggests that all living things have these built-in ways of processing information, like a kind of cellular intuition that helps them respond to their environment in intelligent ways.
Cellular intuition. That's fascinating. So even without brains, organisms can still behave intelligently.
It seems so.
It's like being able to process information and react is just a fundamental part of life itself.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about our own brains. How do they fit into all of this?
Yeah, good point. That's where Narby's book takes a really interesting turn. He suggests that since we're part of nature, understanding how we know might help us understand nature's intelligence too. that kisei we were talking about.
So to understand nature's intelligence, we have to look inward at our own intelligence.
Exactly. Even though our human brains are super complex, they still have a lot in common with other mammals' brains.
Right.
We're all built from the same basic design, which
Yeah.
shows our shared evolutionary history.
So what do we actually know about how our brains work? Like, how do we form memories?
Well, we've learned a lot about that recently. It turns out long-term memories are made by changes in the connections between neurons. Those connections are called synapses.
Wait, so our memories are stored in those tiny gaps between brain cells?
Pretty much. It's amazing how it works. When neurons communicate, they send out these chemical signals called neurotransmitters across the synapse.
Okay.
And those signals trigger electrical impulses in the next neuron. That's how information moves through the brain.
So it's like a dance of electrical and chemical
Well,
signal.
exactly. And the more we use certain synapses, the stronger those connections get. It's like creating a path in a forest. The more you walk it, the clearer it becomes. That's how we make lasting memories.
So it's literally use it or lose it for our brains.
That's a good way to put it. And besides strengthening existing connections, scientists have found out that adult brains can actually grow new neurons too.
What? New brain cells. I thought we were stuck with the ones we were born with.
That's what people used to think. But now we know that learning new things and having new experiences can actually make new brain cells grow.
Wow, that's incredible. So our brains are way more adaptable than we thought.
They really are.
This idea of a brain that's always changing really challenges how we think about the self. Like if our brains are constantly changing, does that mean the self is changing too?
Yeah, that's a big question. The self has been a mystery for philosophers for ages. We usually think of ourselves as a single I, like one thing controlling our thoughts and actions. But what if that's not really true?
What do you mean?
Well, some philosophers and neuroscientists think that the self as one single thing might not even exist. Instead, they think what we experience as the self is just a bunch of different processes happening in the brain, all connected together.
So it's more like a whole orchestra of brain activity creating this illusion of a single self.
That's one way to think about it. It's a pretty mind-blowing idea that makes us question what consciousness really is.
It really does.
But it also fits with what we've been talking about with intelligence being more than just a human thing. Maybe it's something much bigger.
This is so much to take in. We've gone from bees and slime molds to the mysteries of the human brain. It seems like intelligence is everywhere and way more complex than we realized.
It really is. And we've only just scratched the surface of what we're learning about intelligence in nature. Narby's book is full of amazing examples and ideas that make you rethink our place in the world.
It definitely does, and it makes you wonder if even simple organisms like slime molds can solve problems. Does nature have some kind of collective intelligence that we're just starting to understand? Welcome back to our deep dive into intelligence in nature. Before we were talking about how our understanding of the brain and even the self is constantly evolving. And it seems like so much of this research points to the idea that intelligence is so much broader than we typically think.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder if even simple organisms like slime molds can solve complex problems. Does nature as a whole have a kind of collective intelligence, like something we're only just beginning to understand?
Whoa. That's a pretty mind-blowing thought, isn't it?
It is.
It makes human intelligence seem almost tiny in comparison.
Yeah, it's definitely humbling. But it also opens up some amazing possibilities. Like, what if by studying how other organisms are intelligent, we could learn to tap into that wisdom?
Oh, that would be something.
Yeah, maybe we could find solutions to human problems that we never even thought of before.
That brings us back to that concept of chisei that we talked about earlier, that idea of nature's inherent knowing. How do we connect with that as individuals?
Well, I think it starts with changing our perspective.
Okay, how so?
Instead of thinking of nature as something separate from us, we need to remember that we are a part of nature. And we need to stop looking at plants and animals just as objects. We should try to see them as beings with their own intelligence and ability to make choices.
So it's about having more respect and wonder for the natural world.
Exactly. Pay attention to the details. Watch how organisms interact with each other and their environment. Ask questions.
Like what?
Like, why does a vine curl in a certain direction? How does a bee find its way back to the hive? The more we observe and the more we ask questions, the more we open ourselves up to all the amazing intelligence in nature.
It sounds like you're talking about being more mindful in nature.
You got it. It's about quieting our minds, slowing down, and really paying attention to what's happening around us. You'll be amazed by what you notice.
I bet. This has been such a fascinating deep dive, full of surprising insights.
It has been. If you take away just one thing from this, I hope it's a sense of wonder and appreciation for the intelligence that's in every living thing. From the smallest single-celled organism to the entire web of life on Earth.
If intelligence is really that widespread, maybe we need to rethink how we even define it as humans. Maybe it's not just about logic and solving problems. Maybe it's also about being adaptable and resilient and being able to thrive in a world that's always changing.
I think you're right. And you know what? Maybe the biggest lesson we can learn from nature's intelligence is how to live in harmony with our planet and all the creatures on it.
That's a beautiful thought, and a perfect way to wrap up our exploration of intelligence in nature. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's made you curious and inspired you to see the world in a whole new way.